As I was getting into Bitcoin mining, when I first heard about this, I really sympathize with people because I was very dismissive and skeptical. And then as they start to peel back the onion, almost always they say, well, this could have very real world implications for our business. I share this conviction that Bitcoin adoption is going to continue a hyperbolic increase upwards, and that eventually the vast majority of people will use this. It will be totally second nature and natural. That, like, what do you mean I don't use Bitcoin? Of course I have a wallet on my phone.
Produced by Podcast Architects.
Welcome back to another episode of The Path Forward. As always, I'm your host, Dr. Rick Fernandez, and we talk about innovation, education, and the merging of the two. And I'm very excited for our guest today. This is a little executive privilege right here because those of you that know me know I love everything crypto, Bitcoin, blockchain. So I'm very happy to have Steve Kinard here with me on the show today. And he's the director of Bitcoin mining analytics for the Texas Blockchain Council. Steve, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me, Rick, on a Friday afternoon, no less, but I'm happy to be here, and I think we'll have plenty to talk about.
100%. And you're going to have to stop me from asking questions because this thing will go 6 hours if I get to ask all the questions I want. But I think we have a similar story about when we got started and how we got started with interest in it. But just to be sure, share how you got into the Bitcoin space.
Yes, I'll take kind of a step back. My background is really as an energy professional, as an oil and gas professional. And in many aspects, even today, I still consider myself an energy professional. I think anyone in the Bitcoin space should proudly wear that title. So that was really my background. Born and raised in Texas, went to A&M, lived abroad for a while, got a business degree out in DC, and then I wanted to move back home to Texas. And the best way to do that, I thought, was to start an oil company. So I went to Houston and was part of a team that came together that started an oil company there. And so I had kind of firsthand experience building something out of nothing. And it's important to my Bitcoin journey because I interacted directly with the struggles of oil and gas operators to get their natural gas to market. Often in the oil field, you'll drill a well based on oil economics only, and gas comes up with it. And so you're left saying, well, what do we do with the gas? If you don't have a pipeline, you just get nothing. You just burn it off. You flare it. So I had lived that firsthand. I moved up to Dallas, which is where I was born and raised, and I still live today, to work on the banking side of oil and gas. And that's what I was doing when COVID hit. And so everyone's got a story about how that changed their life. And in this case, it was pretty revolutionary for me because I was really getting paid to sit home. There wasn't a whole lot of work to be done in oil and gas when prices were negative, if you remember at the depths of COVID there. So there wasn't a lot of work to do. I had time on my hands. And the seed of all of this was really planted by my wife, who said, hey, I think we should buy some Bitcoin. I was very dismissive of that, very traditional kind of legacy MBA type of outlook. And it sent me down the proverbial rabbit hole, since most of the time my wife's right and I'm wrong. That's kind of a rule of life that applies to more things than Bitcoin. And I found myself going down this road, and I don't honestly know how, when, or where I heard about Bitcoin mining in the oil field. But then I was hooked from kind of this energy perspective, because I said, look, if you can bring another way to monetize that stranded gas, I just knew that's a huge transformational opportunity for Texas. And so I really couldn't take my mind off of that. I couldn't find enough to read about it, podcasts to listen about it, started going to conferences. And I met Lee Bratcher, who is really my neighbor. He lives about a mile away from me. And he had founded the Texas Blockchain Council more as a side hustle. He was a professor by background.
Right.
And we hit it off. Our kids are similar ages, and he's just a great guy. And we really started to to explore whether or not or how I might be able to support the work of the Texas Blockchain Council more enthusiastically. And ultimately that ended up with me saying, you know what, I'm just going to leave my comfortable corporate job. I need to, give this a shot. And so I've been full-time focused on Bitcoin and really Bitcoin mining advocacy for about a year and a half now with the Texas Blockchain Council.
So there's a number of questions and that after sharing that I have, and like I said, our similar story. And shout out to my brother-in-law Jared Gabriel, EOG Resources. He was the one that kind of educated me on the stranded gas and what that meant. And then, much like you, I started attending some TBC events and met some people there that kind of share like, hey, this problem, if we can transfer it into some type of mining capacity, there's huge benefits on all sides. And that's where I really started to dive in. But I do have to ask, since your wife is the one that gave you the nudge, how much did she get to pull the card? Like, hey, I'm the one. Remember, I'm the one that said buy this, and this is going to be of value. Like, does that ever come up in the finance discussion sometimes?
Man, I tell you what, I'll have to add that to the long list of reasons that I love her. Because no, it hasn't come up, but she's very supportive, very sweet. And I can say, she's never kind of lorded that over me. I think in many ways, we couldn't ever have predicted where that was going to go. Sure. So I promise you, if you'd asked me, I would have said, I'm working in the oil field for life. I'm in this, I've built up a career. But I'm glad that life took this turn.
So I love your entrepreneurial spirit there. When did you know you were going to take that leap of faith? Was there one moment that you were like, all right, we're just going to do it. We're going to, this is the crux of it, and I'm going to jump in all in.
It's a good question. I honestly, I'm going to say no. Well, I can definitely say there wasn't like a particular inflection point that something happened or someone said something and I said, well, that's it. Honestly, it was a bit of a struggle. My heart was in Bitcoin long before I made the change. But, the reality of the situation was I had a good job and with a promising trajectory. And more or less, I was hoping that I could kind of merge the two, to be honest. And it became apparent that within the kind of traditional banking trajectory, banks have not been overly welcoming or friendly to Bitcoin yet. I think a lot from a lack of understanding and also the regulatory uncertainty, which is undeniable. So I don't mean to throw banks under the bus, but the reality was that I probably was hanging around longer than I maybe in retrospect would have done because I was thinking, well, maybe an opportunity will come or the right time and place to bring this up will present itself. But the other thing too is the oil field was kind of booming coming back out of COVID. Prices were coming up. So not a lot of incentive for companies to say, well, let's get real innovative right now. When the opportunity right in front was just to execute on kind of the same old bread and butter business. So I think it was more like a process that ultimately led me to that. And it was a situation as well where I tend to take pride in my work. And as increasingly I found my heart, wasn't in it. My heart was in Bitcoin and wanting to learn about that. It became sort of a decision of what was really right for my former employer as well. Because it's like, look, you don't want someone around whose mind is constantly on some other subject matter that doesn't align with the tasks that need to get done. So after kind of weeks and months of reflecting and praying on that, I just said, I got to make a change or eliminate Bitcoin from the career trajectory. And so I didn't want to eliminate the Bitcoin. So I had to, pursue absolutely. That. And I was lucky that, the opportunity, what a tremendous coincidence that the founder of the Texas Blockchain Council lives almost walkable from my home. And so it was just real easy for me to go to all the meetings and get to know them and get plugged in with the network here. So that played a big role as well.
So your role for TBC, give us your day-to-day or month-to-month. What are you doing? How are you doing? How do you affect the education space and also helping people around the state and around the country understand Bitcoin and its value?
Yes, I mean, the short answer is there is no day-to-day. Each day kind of feels like a new day. But the way that Lee being the president of TBC, kind of envisioned the value proposition of this role is twofold. First, as the title indicates, to focus primarily on Bitcoin mining. We have a broader mandate. We have a lot of issues that we advocate around, but it made sense to have someone that was kind of a Bitcoin first, Bitcoin mining focus. And I had that passion and interest, and so I was proud to take that mantle up. So that's kind of number one. Number two was TBC's traditional strength, given Lee's background as a political science professor, was in that political advocacy effort. And that was the most kind of burning need of the industry, frankly. And so that was well established. And the idea with this role was, well, what about things that are outside of that purview that we generally thought of as new strategic partnerships? And so perhaps the two most fruitful so far, or I'll just give two examples of how we've put that into execution. So one is with my alma mater, Texas A&M, which I'm a proud Aggie, as most Aggies are. But
all Aggies, not most.
That's right. That's right. And so, as you well know, we're an energy powerhouse. We're an energy university.
100%.
Bitcoin is energy money, and so the further along we get with A&M, the more I'm like, this was inevitable all along. But the reality is, honestly, it really wasn't. It was about a year and a half now. It was in the early days and weeks of me getting plugged into Texas Blockchain Council that an opportunity presented itself to go down to College Station for an event they were hosting there, focused on Bitcoin. And I said, you know what? I'm gonna work with our members, and I'm gonna take a Bitcoin mining machine down, and I'm gonna donate it because I love my school and I just think this will be fun. And I didn't know where that was gonna go. Well, thankfully, there were a number of professors that were very interested in the subject matter, and accepted the donation. And then we began the long process of kind of getting that machine plugged in and getting the students engaged. And that's where I think we really had a big impact, because I've been down to A&M regarding this partnership probably 6 or 7 times now. And there's always new and interesting students from multidisciplinary backgrounds that find different angles and ways to think about this, but leveraging the traditional strength of Texas A&M, and particularly the Texas A&M Energy Institute there. The university is one of the leading research centers for the Texas grid, the ERCOT-operated electrical grid in Texas. And of course, that's where Bitcoin miners often find their home if they're not in the oil field, and are really pioneers in helping us to reimagine what the grid of the future looks like. And so naturally, a lot of questions arise around that. And so A&M is increasingly stepping into that void and bringing really an academic, really global level of knowledge and expertise. I'll tell you something that's funny. I went to that conference and I said, you know, the top university right now that gets cited in newspaper articles and the media in general, if you went and looked in 2022, so this was a little more than a year ago, was Cambridge and in the UK. And I said, sure, it's a well-known school, it's a prestigious name, right? They've started this alternative finance institute, and I think a lot of the work they're doing there is very interesting. I would encourage your listeners to check that out. It's a pretty substantial website with all kinds of different research initiatives that go well beyond blockchain and Bitcoin, that really deal with the finance industry of the future. So that's all well and fine. They certainly have a lot of money, but there's no Bitcoin mining going on there. And so my question was, how is it possible that US-based media, when dealing with an industry that's coming here, investing here, primarily in Texas, is citing research from England? I don't think that makes any sense. And pretty much everyone in the room is nodding along saying, yeah, we're Texans. We're not going to, play second fiddle to researchers in England. And I think that's the huge opportunity we've got. Is I've been singing this and saying it at many universities, and I'm seeing more and more traction. We can be number one in the world for this new budding industry. Texas can be, just like we are in oil and gas, the undisputed number one place where people come to learn about this new technology that has far-reaching implications. And right now it's being led first by Cambridge, and then I'd probably say MIT is kind of number 2 in there. for in terms of blockchain related research and notoriety. Um, and again, there's no Bitcoin mining going on in Massachusetts. Um, and I think there's a lot to be said for a major state university in the largest state of Bitcoin mining, leading that charge. Of course, it just so happens that the largest Bitcoin mine in the world is about a 45-minute drive from the Texas A&M campus. So that helps as well.
That's right, correct?
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
In Rockdale. So we've taken students out there, and nobody goes to that facility and says, "Yeah, this is all going away. I'm not interested." Universally, I've been there with U.S. senators. We went there with Ted Cruz, down to new students just coming into A&M, and the reaction at a base level is always the same, and it's astonishment. Mm-hmm. Just kind of a certain level of
speechlessness. They're blown away.
It's just you don't even know what to say, because you go there and it's like, this is a facility. It's hundreds of millions of dollars of investment. It's a huge employee. You see all of the people who are employed by it moving about, and what an engineering feat it is to put something together at that scale. And it does make you really start to think, wow, what if there's 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 of these? And there are. Those are being built and invested in Texas. And so it's just really been a privilege to see that and be a part of it, and just invite people to engage with the industry that way. So that was a long way to describe our first partnership, which is Texas A&M. Very proud of that. We also have a great relationship, I should say, with TCU. We've hosted events there in Fort Worth, and with Dallas College, Texas State Technical College. We're working on a partnership with UTD here down the road from where I'm sitting. So there's a lot of interest. So I don't want to just highlight the A&M thing, but I do have to really give them credit for doing tremendous work and being out in front in terms of the Bitcoin mining research. Another really interesting partnership we've had, talking about my oil and gas background, is with the American Association of Professional Landmen, AAPL. They host what is one of, if not the largest, oil and gas conference annual event, the North American Prospect Expo, which is generally referred to as NAPE, which is in Houston. And I went to 5 NAPEs in a row, I believe, before leaving my job. I mean, it's the event
right.
In downtown Houston, thousands and thousands of people. And we launched a Bitcoin mining pavilion in partnership with them at that event. And it was very well received, and a ton of interest has come from that, of people that are really like, hey, I kind of thought this was like a joke, or I don't understand it. And then as they start to peel back the onion, almost always they say, well, this could have very real world implications for our business. And so actually last night, interestingly enough, the event NAPE is in Houston. The office for AAPL is in Fort Worth. So interestingly enough, last night we went over to Fort Worth and hosted a continuing education event at their headquarters there in Fort Worth. And it was really just such an uplifting experience to have this diverse group of people talking about the future of what this technology can do for the oil and gas industry, and particularly the role of landmen, which is what AAPL deals with, in properly documenting things and helping to kind of formalize, because we're in the process right now of, like, a lot of people are interested and we're finally getting into execution. Right. And how do you actually implement this business legally with documents? What kind of lease arrangements? What kind of rights and responsibilities do the different parties and stakeholders have? And so it was just awesome to get in a room and talk about that and really try to advance that discussion there. And then we ended with an opportunity for people to go to one of our member companies. 360 Mining has a mining facility on an oil well in Fort Worth, on a natural gas well, I should say. And so it was kind of taking that theoretical and then saying, this is happening now. This
looks at how they look in practice.
That's right. And so that partnership has been really great. Tremendous potential there. We'll absolutely continue with it, and really love being a part of NAPE in Houston, and I'm positive that AAPL and NAPE will have a presence as well at our summit, which is in Fort Worth in November. And so it's a mutually beneficial arrangement. So that's kind of the thrust of what we're trying to do at Texas Blockchain Council. And we're always canvassing our members and the people listening to this of bring us new ideas. How do we bring new people in to this industry and get interesting discussions happening? There's a lot of events out there,
Sure.
plenty to pick from.
You know,
We don't focus on like throwing the best party. We're trying to listen to our members and have high impact events and education that leads to growing the industry and bringing new professionals and new companies in.
for the energy sector, right? You mentioned ERCOT, and sometimes ERCOT is maligned depending upon what you see and what you hear, and even miners, right, and how they affect the grid. There's a lot of misinformation out there, but from my research, my understanding, miners actually help and strengthen the grid. Tell me if I'm wrong, right? Give me a little bit into how they affect our grid.
Yeah, look, this is a great question. The first thing I'll say, I've been to the ERCOT building in Austin numerous times, and I really would take this opportunity to kind of lift ERCOT up. I know it's
Okay.
easy. It's easy for everyone to say, "Oh,
Yeah.
ERCOT, and we hate it, and all the grid." It's an exceedingly difficult job. It's very complex, often thankless. When the grid works, no one wants to talk about it. When there's a
Yeah,
problem,
it's only when the lights go off, right? Yeah.
So that's just tough in general. All right. There was a lot of turnover post Winter Storm Uri. So there's personnel struggles. And I think that in the aftermath of that, the efforts around engaging with industry and seeking out solutions and being constructive are something to be applauded, because they are working very hard to make sure that our grid is as reliable as it can be. They don't control a lot of things that impact that. They're there to just serve all of the users. They don't get to dictate what kind of generation is built. So I'm just saying it's a difficult job, and there's people down there that are frankly hustling on the behalf of all Texans. And I think a modicum of respect for that difficult work is reasonable. The second thing I would say is, as I was getting into Bitcoin mining, when I first heard about this, I really sympathize with people because I was very dismissive and skeptical. So
What was your biggest like, this is a hoax, or this is funny money?
I think the most compelling kind of falsehood that drew me in was, I said, this is just going to be hacked and it'll go away. It's just some kid out there will figure out a few keystrokes and this will be done, and your coins will all be gone, and this is this is just fundamentally a flash in the pan sort of thing. And my short response here, since we can't go 6 hours, as we said before, is the underlying encryption algorithm that secures the network is secure hash algorithm 256. That algorithm is not unique to the Bitcoin network. It was developed by the NSA, by the United States government. It's never been cracked. It's exceedingly difficult. It's very, very difficult. And we can rest very much assured that the brightest and most nefarious minds in China and Russia and in our own government, I'm sure, have tried to break that encryption algorithm, and they've been unable to. And frankly, if it's broken, we probably have bigger problems than Bitcoin, because it's securing all kinds of other different secrets. So I didn't appreciate that at the beginning of just how the miracle of the mathematics behind encryption, and studying that, and how exceedingly difficult it is. I've heard it characterized as like picking a random atom out of the universe and guessing it correctly. It's vanishingly small, the probability that somebody could reverse engineer or break that encryption algorithm. So that's number one.
Is it fair to say, because this is a great point that you're making, is it fair to say, so like obviously you got a bank account, you have investments, those things that I have are easier to hack, easier to default or fraud, more so than anything that has to do with Bitcoin and the algorithm that supports that? Is that a fair statement?
I think it's fair. I would have an addendum to that, where what differentiates Bitcoin so much is in order to have the security of what the Bitcoin network offers, you have to hold your private keys. And that requires self-reliance, right? So if something happens with your bank, you can always recover it. You can go down to, you go to the branch and
Right.
they'll reset it or whatever it is. So it never resides entirely with you, right? I think that's a strength. I'm a believer in sovereign individuals and individual liberty, but it is a key difference. And for some people, it creates anxiety. And, different people have different outlooks, but it is a remarkable technical advancement that for essentially free, because I mean, this is open source software, you can open a wallet on the Bitcoin network, receive Bitcoin, have no counterparty risk, hold that for yourself, just you with those private keys, and nobody can take that from you. I think there's an underlying human rights advancement there that shouldn't be discounted.
Well,
It takes work to understand it. It's just,
no,
it's
100%.
too mind bending when you first encounter that and you say, no, that's silly. So it took me 2 years. I often tell people this. It took me 2 years. Part of my work and just meeting with people and having discussions like this is maybe it'll take you 2 months, or in a best case scenario, 2 weeks. But nobody just sits down for a conversation and says, I get it, great, no more questions, I believe. You got to grapple with some of these issues to come out the other side realizing that you don't have to sell everything you have and just buy Bitcoin. But I do think that it's a very compelling technical advancement that has unique properties that you cannot get anywhere else. I'll say that.
You know where it hit me and like where it really like made me think, this is ridiculous.
Yeah.
When I bought a house, right? Because you're transferring funds and then there's this wait and it's a lot of funds to be transferred and wait on this wire. And and it's taking time. And I'm like, why is this? You can hit a key and send stuff instantaneously. Like, why am I in this predicament for my own money, worried about it?
Yep.
And I was like, this is kind of ridiculous.
Yep.
And then I started thinking back, this is what people are talking about is there's no need to do that. We really have the technology where that anxiety that I'm having about sending money into the ether and hoping that it gets between a third party on my behalf is way more scary in my opinion than, hey, making sure I have my own individual security keys to access. And so that's when it like really sank in for me. Like, I need to really think about how this is going to affect my life, not only at this one transaction, but moving forward.
Yeah, no, you're right. It's an empowering experience to not ask anyone, but if you want to confirm a transaction's taken place, it's very cheap and available to have a block explorer, and you've got a transaction ID and the address, you can find it. You don't have to wonder, where the Bitcoin's gone or where everybody can see it. It's really the most transparent network. And it's a unique value proposition. So yeah, we digress a little there, but I think it's an important discussion to have. And I often try to lead with like, hey, I know this is difficult to wrap your head around. And really, I don't blame people or judge anyone for being dismissive or skeptical, because it's a natural kind of reaction to a really disruptive technology. We were having a funny discussion last night where I was kind of inviting people, and you might have a better example of this, but the one that jumped out to me was texting and Twitter, and I'll explain this. So I was finishing high school in 2003. It's the early days of texting. I didn't have a cell phone until I got out of high school. Like it was like a privilege to have they were expensive back then. And texting was like ridiculous. So slow. It was like 50 cents a message. The little envelope, you had to like hit the number, like, if you wanted C, you had to hit one, twice. Like it was completely absurd. And I so remember, not just me, but all of us like laughing, like, why would you do that? Like, just call someone. Why would you ever do this? This is ridiculous. And if somebody had said to me, Well, actually, what's going to happen is in a couple years, there'll be a phone where the whole thing is a screen, the iPhone, which came out 4 years later. And then you'll use this texting in this little app that's going to have a little blue bird on it. And within 15 years, the presidential election will be swayed and largely determined by what is texted on that little blue bird app. I mean, it sounds so completely and totally absurd that you wouldn't have you couldn't even come up with something that ridiculous back then of where that technology was going to lead to. And I think there's others examples that we interact with technology, just dismiss it. And then in retrospect, it's like, yeah, of course. Of course Blockbuster was going to go away and Netflix was going to win. That wasn't that obvious when
No,
that
not
was
at all.
in the early,
As
right?
one that had Blockbuster stock way back when.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But
I was holding on. I was like, maybe it'll come back. Maybe the VCR will come back.
I
But
love
I got out of it soon enough. But
I have a soft place in my heart for Blockbuster, but that's the experience that many of us have had with these technologies. So
yes.
I share this conviction that Bitcoin adoption is going to continue a hyperbolic increase upwards, and that eventually the vast majority of people will use this in some shape, way, or form, and it will be totally second nature and natural. That, like, what do you mean I don't use Bitcoin? Of course I have a wallet on my phone. Like, it'll just be a basic, like, there's no question that you would have that. And that still seems kind of far-fetched to a lot of people. But that's the process of a new technology emerging. It's still very volatile. So it's a good example. And I think it helps people take a step back and kind of reassess where we are in the process, because it's still very early. But
no, my example of sharing with a friend, we were talking about something and we were at dinner, and I said, think about it this way. Can you think of the last time you paid with cash? When's the last time you paid dinner with cash? And we were both looking at each other like, I couldn't tell you. Like, I couldn't pinpoint, maybe giving the kids lunch, but I don't even give the kids lunch money. It goes into their school, lunch account. Like, that type of is what makes me think, like, there's things that we're not going to use in the same way, and our kids are not even going to experience cash at all. I wouldn't think. There's going to be a point where it's not even something that you do. And which leads me to the question we were talking about Texas, and Texas being the leader.
mm-hmm.
What do you think is going to be? Because I agree with you 100%. There is zero reason. This state is unbelievable for innovation and business, and it's ripe for being the leader globally, in my belief. What's that tipping point for this state? And I have my own belief about that, but I want to hear what your thought is what's our tipping point? How do we get there, I guess?
I may have a non-traditional outlook on this, but I really think that it comes back to I think that in the coming years, increasingly, Bitcoin miners are going to show that this kind of innovation in our electrical grid can be really revolutionary to make it more resilient, and to facilitate more and more generation that is being built, largely solar and wind, that is very volatile, that is weather dependent. I think that the story of that is going to help to pull this into the mainstream more and make it like a Texan. Like, that's a distinctly, we have a unique situation in Texas that we have our own grid system. And so I'm a believer that this story is really so positive if we can turn the narrative and orient it towards truth, that there's a point of pride there, frankly. Like, when I go and interact with these Texas A&M researchers, I'm like, we have got to continue this research, and, like, what an incredible opportunity for our kind of homegrown talent to lead in, like, fundamentally reimagining how an energy grid works. And something I would highlight in this, in terms of what's going on in ERCOT and our Texas grid, Bitcoin miners, they don't participate in anything that's special to them. I think that's a big misunderstanding that they're getting like some kind of special treatment or a subsidy. Absolutely not. They are not getting a subsidy. Any company can participate in what's referred to as the ancillary services market within ERCOT. I'll give you an interesting statistic. Last month it was real hot, as all Texans know, and there was volatility in the grid. There were some close calls there, and ERCOT relies on that ancillary service market to procure flexible demand that they can use to balance the grid through those difficult moments of, wind surging upwards or downwards, demand spiking when it gets hot. So the total cost of that was about $900 million. And so we'll see headlines where this company got 10 or 20 or 30 million in an ancillary service market. And it's just not, it's a much bigger market. And it's not just unique to Bitcoin miners. And the reason it's there is to help the grid. Like, we're not just paying for nothing. It's not just like a grant that's being handed out. It's based on the assessment that is a required resource to ensure that the grid is as resilient as it can be. And if somebody can do it better, faster, cheaper than the Bitcoin miner, then they're going to win out, because that's an open bidding process. So the reason that's important is because the miners are showing that they are the best. They are the most effective at providing that flexibility that can help to balance the grid and to support more and more resources that we need coming into our grid. So I'm hopeful. Like, how does this become a Texas story? That to me is we are in a very, very unique situation to show and really at scale prove out the societal benefits of embracing that side of Bitcoin mining. And what I would say is we already see a lot of our miners that are starting to pursue and look at other kinds of high performance computing applications. And the biggest is artificial intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
And so think about how much bigger that could get. So it's not, I love Bitcoin. I think it's an important technology, but it's not just about Bitcoin.
Right.
It's that the miners are at the cutting edge of kind of breaking open this new frontier of how large flexible loads on the grid can play a positive role, and how should we structure that? How should we invest in it? How should we compensate it? And that's an important question. And if Texas becomes the leader, I think we'll create that sort of hub of subject matter expertise, just like we did in oil and gas, where it doesn't mean there's no oil and gas companies in Oklahoma, for instance. Of course there are. I don't have anything against Oklahoma. But Texas is the undisputed number one place for oil and gas. That's the same future I see for Bitcoin mining. And as we kind of embrace that identity, I think that increased Bitcoin adoption itself, just at a retail level, is kind of a natural, downstream of that. So that's my outlook. That's how I got pulled really into Bitcoin, is because it's energy money, and having a scarce resource, a perfectly scarce resource like Bitcoin that's secured by energy, is very interesting to me, and it should be interesting to all Texans because we're an energy state. That's what we do best. So that's the near term future that I see. More broadly, I think that I'll give you another interesting example from what we did last night. It's so simple, but it's helpful. We just invited up the head of AAPL, Leanne, who runs that association in Fort Worth that we were partnering with. And we just said, we'll just do a small Bitcoin transaction just to show. And so we helped her download an app on her phone. It's free. And then Lee sent her, not a lot, just some small amount, just a
couple hundred.
She hadn't interacted with it. And in
right.
3 minutes, you had a free app on your phone, had a QR code. He swiped it, and boom, you were done. And that kind of simple, like, look, we can talk and pontificate and all that, but just interact at a basic level with how simple this is. And often people say, yeah, like more and more people are going to use, like you said, it's just easier than legacy cash or slow systems. So that's kind of the simple. We often just we'll try to go down that path of yeah, we can talk analysis and the history and the encryption algorithm, but let
Use
me
it.
just show you this app. Like
Use it.
let's just do it. And almost universally, people are like, oh, I didn't know it was so easy. So it's
That's
it's
it.
it's it's an easy way to do it.
100%. One of the best moments for me was downloading an app on my wife and saying, "Hey, let's just buy $500 in Bitcoin and you just play with it. Like, just see." She was so excited. Like, she's watching it. Like, "Hey, what does it mean here? Can I sell it now? You can sell it now. You can wait." And learning about it through, like you said, using an experiment. That's what I had to jump in there when I was getting in, pretty early and figuring out, all right, do I trust to send this money over this, and saying, all right, I'm gonna do it. And if I lose a couple $100 here and there, I need to experiment to see how this thing works. And is it really what people are saying it is, where it's instantaneous and I don't have to go through all of these third parties to be able to do some transactions. It's been great, that learning experience. Can I give you my pitch on how we help it tip a little bit in Texas?
I'm interested to hear it. Please.
I mean, so we hadn't had a long time to talk today, but been an educator for a long time before I got into the private sector. I really have a passion for getting this technology into the hands of students, right? Because I think it's like you've been talking about, it's all interconnected. We're talking about finance, we're talking about energy, we're talking about business, all the things that make, Texas great and strong and healthy. And like you said, the technology is continuing to evolve. What they're going to have to do with technology when they get into the workforce is not nowhere near what you and I have had to do, what our parents have had to do. It is continuously
That's right.
evolving. And the rate of
Mhm.
change is so fast now. I feel like if we can get into the hands of students to experiment, to learn about, to understand, it will exponentially blow up and be a good thing. And even if it's something that, hey, this isn't for me, or that's okay, but the all of the aspects that can be integrated and learned, it touches every part of the educational spectrum in my belief. And I think school districts and universities, for that matter, need to understand that. Like, you can't keep this out of the hands of we just because the adults are a little fearful or don't know a lot about it. That can't be a barrier to the next generation, because they're going to have to use it. They're going to have to understand it. And why not Texas? Shouldn't be Miami, shouldn't be New York. It should be us, because we've got the people and the infrastructure and the state to be able to do it, I think, better than anybody. It's just my own personal belief. So that's been my big push, is like, I want it in schools to understand and learn. And there's been a little bit, and I've pitched to a couple of schools, like, look, I'll build the curriculum, I'll write the coursework, I'll do whatever I need to do to help. I'll find somebody that'll give us some mining equipment and just show us the algorithm and talk about how this works. And it's just hard because educators are a little like, well, we don't know enough about it, right? They've heard the term Bitcoin, but we're unsure.
Well, that's well said. I couldn't agree more. And in fact, we'll have to follow up because next week we're going on a tour of a K through 12 school here in the area. I'll refrain from disclosing their name because I don't know if they would want that. Because we're in that assessment phase of kind of what is this? How might it be in the curriculum? What does that look like? And I don't know the answer, to be honest, Rick. But I am encouraged that that they've invited us to come and meet. And my understanding is we're going to talk with one of the classes there. I think like a fintech club that they might have.
That's
So
awesome.
there's some green shoots. I don't know ultimately, what that curriculum looks like and how to get kids interacting with that. But I do agree that we need to encourage and embrace that schools should be a place to foster innovation. Doesn't mean every innovation works or that every kid's going to want to work in that, but we have to be exposed to a broad set of different possibilities, right? So I give this school credit for, I think, pursuing that kind of approach. And then Bitcoin, particularly, I do feel strongly like some people it'll have a huge impact in their life, but I think in the future, almost everyone is going to use this in some way, shape, or form. So, so having those
100%.
base, it's like the typing class I had to take when I was in school. Like it is handy to be able to type without looking at it. So knowing the basics of like how to download an open source wallet and track a transaction, it's not bad knowledge to have and could have very far reaching utility, even if you're not a full-time, Bitcoin professional.
100%.
So I'm interested to pursue it and just keep an open mind and see how I can be a resource. But I love where your head's at and your ambition to lead in that area.
Well, if you think about it, like when we were kids, right? And I don't want to belabor this point, but a lot of times it's so hard to have kids be interested in something. Like we know it's good for them. We know the careers out there, but they're kids. They're like, I'm not really interested. You have all of the things that you've always wanted in terms of being an educator and being able to say, hey, this is going to be interesting for all of these factors, right? You got gaming components, you've got peer-to-peer, which they're already operating in. You've got all of these things that you've been wanting to have for your programming to say kids are going to be interested. So therefore their parents are going to support it and we can do this well right here, like exploding in front of us, right? And it's kind of like the robotics and STEM. Everybody's, was so hot on robotics and STEM because kids are interested in it. And you have that now. And my belief is the time is to strike now because they are interested and it touches almost every piece of how they're interacting. We just haven't made the connections ourselves as adults just yet, but they will. They'll make the connections quicker than we do sometimes. So, I mean, kudos to you guys for doing that. And if I can be a resource or help, I mean, literally, I have written syllabuses. I have written, in the Texas Education Agency, there's an innovative course that you have to fill out. Like I've gone as far as I can go. I'm just looking for some districts to say, hey, we need to do this. Right?
I
Because you
think we may
mentioned
have
AI.
something to talk about there, Rick. I'll have to follow up with you. Let's see how these next meetings go. So
yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Some suspense there.
Yeah, a little teaser.
Yeah.
Well, hey, I know I don't want to take up too much of your time. I do want to let you shout out a November big event coming up for TBC. Tell us a little bit about that, and if people want to get involved, how do they do it?
Yeah. Thanks, Rick. So we have one big annual event that's bigger than all others. It is our summit. It is this year. It is the North American Blockchain Summit. So we've really expanded this because we've had a lot of nationwide attendees in the past, and even international. So it's gone from Texas Summit to really the North American Blockchain Summit, and we've moved it from Austin to Fort Worth. Which I think is going to be a really exciting venue. Fort Worth was the first city to mine Bitcoin through a partnership that we were involved in with the city of Fort Worth. And it's just a really fun town. We're going to be right in the downtown at the convention center. So really nice venue. And, our summit is differentiated, I think, and we bring together really a different and unique and diverse group of people. We have a core of Bitcoin miners. That is kind of our core constituency and probably what we do most notably. And so we will have a Bitcoin mining stage that's very focused on that at a professional, very high professional level. We're going to have opportunities for people to see Bitcoin mining operations. I think that'll be really cool. But then our main stage will really bring a lot of our policy focus. So we've had a number of bills that we've worked on in the past. We'll have more going into the next legislative session. So we'll be able to get people plugged into that process and see what's on the horizon for making Texas, the best jurisdiction for this technology. And we're working with a lot of new and external parties to bring different viewpoints. So we're going to have programming specifically for CPAs, for accountants. We're going to have some for lawyers, continuing education. We're going to have banking track, registered investment advisors. We're going to have a track. So the idea behind that is not only to make the event impactful, but to bring new and diverse people and get them talking and networking at our event. And then our exhibit floor is going to be probably 5 times the size of what it was last year. So we're just excited about that because we can have a much broader, offering of different exhibitors. And I know that we'll have a number of universities, as we've already talked about today. I think that's really important. And maybe between now and then, maybe we'll team up. We could even have some K through 12 people talking about that subject matter. But our focus for this event is to really bring that kind of innovative, like what's next kind of discussion and get the right people in the room to highlight that and to really be a catalyst for making that happen. And then people do enjoy, our typical headline speakers have been like Senator Ted Cruz, who's been a great champion at the federal level for some of the changes that we need to have a better regulatory framework. So we would love to have people in Fort Worth. It's November 15th through the 17th. And there's a lot more information at NorthAmericanBlockchainSummit.com. And I would just encourage people to check that out. We're always updating it with new speakers and sponsors, and those are flowing in day by day now, thankfully. And it's just going to be, I think, a really impactful and differentiated event in the space.
That's awesome. That's outstanding. And I can say from experience, when I was hesitant and new in the space, sometimes you're worried about like, can I ask for help? People are going to think I'm this group. And shout out to Lee and the team and you guys are the most helpful people you will ever, like, there is nobody that's going to turn you down. Like if you're just brand new and wanting to learn, they are so helpful. And I never once felt like, that's a dumb question, or everybody just wants to help, man. And you're right. It's a diverse group that just are very passionate about this space and willing to help and willing to share really anytime, any place, anywhere. I mean, just like you jumping on, we've never met, and you was like, yeah, let's jump on and talk, man. And so I can't be more thankful. You know what I mean? It's just, I could be some lunatic, hopefully I'm not, but it's just a great energy of learning, right? Which really struck me. It's just everybody's there to learn and help and support. So, Steve, I really appreciate it. I really promise I didn't mean to take up this much of your time today, but thank you so much, man. I really appreciate your time and all the work that you're doing. And I look forward for you guys to continue just to innovate in this space and make Texas number one in the world.
Thank you, man. Look, the future is bright, and the more people we can get in, I couldn't echo more what you just said. Doesn't matter if you're new, old, young. What we need, diverse and innovative people coming to these events and to this industry and just learning about it. So I really enjoy this. I'm glad we got the opportunity to talk, and I just encourage people reach out. TexasBlockchainCouncil.org is our website, and we have individual memberships there, and I'd love to have a phone call and meet with as many people as I can and be a resource if I can do that for somebody. But I really just, I try and enjoy finding any new opportunity to reach out to people and just say, look, this is something that can impact you, and you should look into it and be open to learning about new technology.
Absolutely. When we'll put all that information in the links below, so that way everybody can, if they're interested, they want to reach out, or they're curious, they can do that. So again, hey man, thank you for being here, and hopefully I can have you back on maybe in a couple of months, check back in maybe after the event and just get kind of a recap of the highlights and what you saw there. So great having you on.
That'd be fantastic. Thank you, Rick.
Thank you.
Produced by Podcast Architects.